If you read most headlines about raw milk, you'd think that it's the most dangerous food in the world. But for some reason beyond me, wink wink, no, but for real, for some reason, millions of people keep wanting to drink it. It's estimated that 3.2% of the US population drinks raw milk, and today that's about 10.6 million people. That's a lot of people. But there's something about it that I can't quite get my head around. The number of people who have died from raw milk seems small compared to other foods, even tinier considering the numbers that we just mentioned. Today, we'll look at 5 foods that are arguably more deadly than raw milk. In no particular order, of course. Be sure to stay till the end for a bonus food that's probably more deadly than the rest. And as always, keep in mind that I'm just a normal person trying to figure stuff out. I'm not giving advice of any kind, and I'm not telling you to eat or to avoid eating any of these foods. I'm just presenting information that I find interesting. Let me know in the comments below if you think these foods are deadlier than raw milk. Number 5. Live octopus, a dish that's popular in South Korea where it's called sannakji. Most of the time it's served cut up into pieces, but sometimes it's eaten whole. It's been linked to at least 7 deaths between 2007 and today. Eating something that's alive and that's actively trying to stay alive while you're eating it is probably not a great idea. So if you ever want to try this, make sure it's the type that's cut up first. Number 4. Pufferfish, also known as fugu. Pufferfish is a delicacy in Japan, Korea, and other countries. Some organs of the pufferfish, like the liver and intestines, contain tetrodotoxin and or saxitoxin, which causes paralysis, difficulty breathing, and possibly death if consumed. The Tokyo Bureau of Public Welfare and Public Health states that less than 6 people die per year from consuming pufferfish. But another study claims that 50 people die from pufferfish poisoning every year in Japan. Maybe the less than 6 per year figure is for Tokyo alone? Figures are difficult to find for Korea, but it seems like an average of 3 people die per year from pufferfish according to this study. Now on to number 3, uncooked mushrooms. This one's a little complicated because the mushrooms that you find at a normal grocery store are usually safe to eat. But when comparing the amount of deaths from raw milk over the years to mushrooms, you can make the argument that mushrooms are more deadly. Among other outbreaks, undercooked or raw morel mushrooms were associated with 2 deaths in 2023, and raw enoki mushrooms were linked to 4 deaths and several listeria outbreaks since 2020 in the US. If you're going to eat mushrooms, it's a good idea to cook them thoroughly. Now, number 2 is a curveball, and you gotta be kidding me with this one. It's hot dogs. Hot dogs are suspected of causing about 77 deaths per year. Not from bacteria, viruses, or parasites, but because they're the perfect shape to choke people. And number 1 isn't too surprising. It's raw milk. Just kidding. It is raw though. Raw oysters. Oysters can be contaminated with Vibrio bacteria that cause an estimated 100 deaths per year in the United States, according to these guys. That sounds like a ton of deaths from oysters, right? But there's a point I want to get to here, and that's the word estimate. And so I don't get into trouble, I'm going to direct our attention to this article about consuming raw oysters because they do a much better job of explaining this than I could. The CDC does not track actual illnesses caused by consuming raw oysters. Their data is only an estimate, not a true accounting of a causal relationship between oysters and food poisoning. What the CDC estimates is that 80,000 people in the US get sick from a bad oyster every year. The CDC also estimates that every year 48 million US residents get food poisoning. In a country of almost 350 million, that means 1 in 6 people who ate food, presumably all of us, got food poisoning in the past 12 months. Compare that to the illness rate for oysters. Of course, not all of us eat them. There's another study conducted by the Mississippi State University that claimed to find 43% of Americans eat raw oysters. That sounds too high, doesn't it? Let's go with a super conservative estimate that 10% of the population eats raw oysters. 35 million American oyster eaters and an estimated 80,000 cases of illness that might be attributed to eating a bad oyster returns this math. 1 in 438 of our oyster-eating neighbors were sickened by a bad oyster in the past 12 months. The point is that all foods on this list are legal, except fugu. Fugu's legal in Japan and South Korea, but there are some restrictions on it in the United States. Then again, if fugu isn't prepared correctly, it's literally fucking poisonous. What about raw milk, you ask? I'm not trying to argue that raw milk is harmless. If you look for it, you can find a 2012 CDC study that found 2 deaths were attributed to raw milk between 1993 and 2006. Don't get me wrong, there have been outbreaks associated with raw milk as well, but what about all the foods linked to salmonella, listeria, and other foodborne illness outbreaks? And I wanted to cut in here because I know that some of you in the comments will be like,
"This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Raw milk killed thousands and thousands of infants during the Industrial Revolution."
And I think that you should really look up swill milk if that's the case, because if you consider swill milk the same as raw milk,
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
If you think raw milk should be illegal, shouldn't you also think that all the other foods in this episode and all the other foods that can cause harm to humans should be illegal? Think about this. There are cultural delicacies that, if prepared incorrectly, could make people sick. Should we make those illegal as well? And now's a good time to bring up a bonus food that's probably even more deadly than raw milk: cantaloupe. Just last year, a salmonella outbreak was linked to anywhere from 6 to 8 deaths, which this article says that 3 deaths occurred in the United States and 5 deaths occurred in Canada. What? My opinion in this doesn't matter, but what do you think? Should cantaloupe be banned? Should the other foods on this list be restricted, or do you think that we, as consumers, should assume the risk of the foods that we decide to eat? Are there any other foods that you would include on this list? Let me know in the comments below. For more information about the history of raw milk, please see my other videos linked below. And if you learned something new, please like and subscribe. It would really help the channel. Share this with a friend, and thank you so much for watching. Take care.